Why do bad things happen to good people? Not as a theory, not as a quote, but as a question that sits in your chest when something goes wrong. You remember the moment clearly. You tried to do everything right. You were honest when it was easier to lie. You stayed when it was easier to leave. You gave more than you received. And still, it was not enough. Something slipped through your hands. Someone you trusted disappointed you. Something you believed in collapsed without warning. And in that silence that follows, there is a thought you cannot ignore. This is not fair. Because you believed something very simple. That being good would protect you. That kindness would come back to you. That doing the right thing would lead to the right outcome. It is a belief most people carry without ever questioning it. It feels natural. It feels right. But life does not move according to that rule. Life does not pause to ask whether you deserve what is happening. It does not adjust itself to match your effort. It does not reward you simply because your intentions are pure. And that is where the confusion begins. Because you are looking at life through a lens that promises fairness, while life itself is not built on fairness. It is built on something far more exact: cause and effect. Everything that happens has a reason, but not the kind of reason you expect. It is not a reward system. It is not a moral judgment. It is a chain of conditions unfolding. You may act with kindness, but still carry fear inside. You may give love, but also expect something in return. You may choose what is right, but still resist what you cannot control. And those invisible layers matter. More than the identity you give yourself. You say, I am a good person, but life does not respond to labels. It responds to patterns. To the way you think when no one is watching. To the way you react when things do not go your way. To the attachments you hold on to without realizing. That is the part most people never see. They focus on what they did. They do not look at how they did it. They believe their kindness should guarantee a certain outcome. And when it does not, they feel betrayed. But life did not betray them. Life simply followed its own nature. Unbiased, unemotional, unattached. And that is difficult to accept. Because it means your suffering is not proof that life is unfair. It is proof that your expectations do not match reality. That realization is not comfortable. It removes the idea that being good is enough. But it also opens something deeper: understanding. Because the moment you stop asking, why is this happening to me? You begin to ask a different question. What is really creating this experience? And that question changes everything. It shifts your attention from blame to awareness, from outside to inside, from feeling like a victim of life to becoming someone who can actually see it clearly. And once you begin to see clearly, even just a little, the same situation no longer feels the same. Not because life has changed, but because you have started to understand it. You start to understand that life is not punishing you, that it is not personal, that it is not about fairness. But even then, something inside you resists, because the pain still feels real, the loss still feels heavy, the disappointment still lingers, and your mind keeps asking, if this is not bad, then why does it hurt so much? That is where the next layer begins. You are not just questioning what happened, you are judging it. Immediately. You look at a moment in your life and decide, this is bad. A relationship ends, a plan fails, something you worked for disappears, and without hesitation, your mind labels it. Wrong, unfair, unnecessary. But here is something you rarely consider. You are judging a single moment, as if it is the whole story. You are standing in the middle of a chapter and deciding how the entire book ends. That is where the illusion begins. Because what feels like destruction now may be the beginning of something you cannot yet see. What feels like loss may be removing something that was holding you back. What feels like failure may be redirecting you towards something more aligned. But you cannot see that yet, because you are too close to the moment, too involved in the emotion, too attached to how things were supposed to go. So your mind reacts quickly. This should not be happening. That sentence is quiet but powerful, because the moment you say it, you are no longer just experiencing reality. You are rejecting it. And that rejection creates tension. You begin to fight what is already happening. You replay the situation. You question every detail. You imagine different outcomes. You try to rewrite something that has already unfolded. And the more you do that, the heavier it feels. Not because the situation is growing, but because your resistance is. Think back to your own life. There were moments you thought would break you, moments you labeled as the worst thing that could happen. But time passed, and something changed. You began to see those moments differently. You saw how they forced you to grow, how they pushed you in a direction you would not have chosen, how they revealed things you were not aware of before. And slowly, almost quietly, you realized something unexpected. It had to happen, not because it was pleasant, not because you wanted it, but because without it, you would not be where you are now. This is the part most people struggle to accept. You do not have the full view of your life. You only see what is in front of you. And from that limited view, you are trying to judge what is good and what is bad. But life is not unfolding in isolated moments. It is unfolding as a process. Every experience connects to the next. Every difficulty shapes something within you. Every ending creates space for something else. But when you demand immediate meaning, you create unnecessary suffering. Because you expect clarity too soon. You expect comfort too quickly. You expect life to make sense on your timeline. And when it does not, you feel lost. Not because life is wrong, but because you are trying to understand it too early. So the question shifts again. Not why is this bad, but what if I do not fully understand this yet? That question softens something inside you. It creates space. Space to observe instead of judge. Space to experience instead of resist. And in that space, the same moment begins to feel different. Not lighter immediately, but less suffocating. Because you are no longer demanding that it fit your idea of how things should be. You are allowing it to unfold. And that is where understanding begins. Not in certainty, but in patience. You begin to step back. You stop judging so quickly. You stop demanding immediate answers. You allow things to unfold even when they feel unclear. And for a moment, it helps. The weight softens. The resistance loosens. But then another question appears, a deeper one. If life is not unfair, and if I just do not see the full picture yet, then why do these painful patterns keep repeating? Different people, different situations, different moments in time, but somehow the same feeling. Disappointment, loss, being let down, being misunderstood. It starts to feel like more than coincidence, like life is circling back to the same place again and again. And that is where the next truth becomes unavoidable. Being a good person does not mean you are a fully aware person. You can be kind, you can be honest, you can have good intentions, and still move through life unconsciously, still repeat the same patterns, still make choices without seeing what is really driving them, still hold on to things that quietly create suffering. That is what Buddhism calls ignorance, not a lack of intelligence, but a lack of awareness. You may not harm others, but you might still cling to expectations. You might still depend on certain outcomes to feel stable. You might still believe that if you do everything right, life should respond in a certain way. And those beliefs shape your experience. Quietly, powerfully, without you even noticing. This is why the same kind of pain returns, not because life is targeting you, but because something inside you has not changed yet. Think about it carefully. You meet someone who feels familiar. There is a connection, a sense of understanding, but later something breaks and you feel the same disappointment you felt before. You tell yourself it is just bad luck, that you chose the wrong person. But what if the real question is not about them? What if it is about what you were drawn to, what you ignored, what you hoped would be different? There is a pattern there, and until you see it, it continues. You may believe you are acting from kindness, but beneath that kindness, there may be attachment, a need for appreciation, a hope to be understood, an expectation that your effort will be returned in the same way. And when it is not, it hurts. Not because kindness is wrong, but because it was carrying something unspoken, something you were not fully aware of. This is the part that creates curiosity, because it asks you to look deeper than your actions. It asks you to look at your motivations, not what you do, but why you do it. And that question changes everything, because now you are not just observing life, you are observing yourself within it. You begin to notice subtle things, the way you hold on to certain outcomes, the way you react when things do not go your way, the way you choose people who fit a familiar emotional pattern. And slowly, something becomes clear. You are not just experiencing life. You are participating in creating your experience of it, not consciously, but through patterns you have never fully seen. And once you begin to see them, even slightly, you cannot unsee them. You start to recognize that being a good person is not the end of the journey. It is only the beginning. Because awareness is what transforms your life. Not intention alone, not effort alone, but the ability to see clearly, to see where you are attached, to see where you are expecting, to see where you are repeating. And that is where something shifts. Not outside, but inside. You stop asking, why does this keep happening to me? And you begin asking, what am I not seeing yet? And that question opens a completely different path. So now you begin to see something, not clearly yet, but enough to feel it. The patterns, the repetition, the quiet ways you have been participating in your own experience. And that realization is uncomfortable because it takes away the easiest explanation, that life is unfair, that people are the problem, that everything is happening against you. But if it is not that, then what is it? Here is where the next shift happens. What if nothing in your life is actually random? Not the people you meet, not the situations you fall into, not even the pain you keep feeling. What if all of it is reflecting something back to you? Not to punish you, but to show you something you have not seen yet. Because every experience carries information, not always obvious, not always easy to accept, but always there. The way someone treats you may reveal what you tolerate. The way you react may reveal what you are attached to. The way something hurts may reveal what you are holding on to. And this is where things become difficult, because reflection does not always feel gentle. Sometimes it feels like loss. Sometimes it feels like rejection. Sometimes it feels like everything falling apart. But what if those moments are not destroying you? What if they are exposing something you have been avoiding, something you did not want to see? You may believe you are choosing freely, but what if your choices are shaped by patterns you do not notice? You may believe you are reacting normally, but what if your reactions are repeating something familiar? You may believe you are just unlucky, but what if you are being shown the same lesson in different forms? This is why the same feeling keeps returning, because the source has not changed. You meet a different person, but feel the same disappointment. You enter a new situation, but react in the same way. And each time, it feels like a new problem. But it is not. It is the same pattern wearing a different face. And life does not stop presenting it. Not because it is against you, but because it is waiting for you to see it. Clearly, fully, without turning away. That is the part most people avoid, because it is easier to look outward, to point at someone else, to blame a situation, to say, this should not have happened. But reflection does not allow that. It brings your attention inward, to your expectations, to your attachments, to the parts of you that react automatically. And once you begin to look there, something changes. You notice things you missed before. The way you ignore certain signs, the way you hold on when something is already slipping away, the way you hope things will change, even when they consistently do not. These are not mistakes. They are patterns, and patterns repeat until they are understood. Not judged, not forced to change, but seen. Because the moment you truly see a pattern, you create distance from it. You are no longer completely inside it. You are aware of it. And that awareness is powerful. It does not remove the situation immediately. It does not erase the feeling, but it changes your relationship to it. You begin to respond differently. Slightly at first, but enough to break the automatic cycle. And this is where the deeper truth reveals itself. Life is not trying to hurt you. It is trying to show you something you keep overlooking, not through comfort, but through clarity. And clarity often comes through discomfort, because discomfort forces attention. It stops you from moving unconsciously. It makes you pause. It makes you question. It makes you look. And once you start looking, even a little, you realize something important. You have not been just going through life. You have been interacting with it in ways you did not fully understand. And now, for the first time, you are beginning to see. You start to see the pattern. You start to notice the reflection. You begin to understand that life is not attacking you. It is revealing something to you. And for a moment, that awareness feels powerful, like you are finally waking up. But then something unexpected happens. The pain is still there. The situation still hurts. The loss still feels heavy. The disappointment still lingers in your chest. And now you are confused again. If I understand this, Why does it still hurt so much? That is where the next layer begins. Because what is hurting you is not just what happened, it is how tightly you are holding on to it. You are not just experiencing reality, you are resisting it, quietly, almost automatically. You lose something, and your mind says, "This should not have happened." You get hurt, and your mind says, "This is not what I wanted." You face something unexpected, and your mind says, "This is wrong." Those sentences seem small, but they carry weight, because the moment you say them, you create a conflict between what is happening and what you believe should be happening. And that conflict is where suffering begins, not in the event itself, but in your resistance to it. Think about it carefully. Pain is natural. Loss happens. People change. Situations end. That is part of life. But suffering is something else. It is the tension you create when you refuse to accept what is already here. You keep replaying the moment. You keep imagining different outcomes. You keep wishing things were different. And the more you do that, the more you stay stuck, not in the situation, but in your attachment to how it was supposed to be. This is what makes two people experience the same event differently. One feels the pain and allows it to pass. The other holds on and carries it for months, even years. The difference is not strength, it is attachment. One accepts what is, the other fights it. And fighting reality is exhausting because reality does not change just because you resist it. So you remain in tension between what happened and what you wish had happened. That gap feels unbearable. But here is the part most people do not see. You are not holding on to the situation. You are holding on to an idea, an image of how things should have been, a version of reality that no longer exists. And as long as you hold on to that image, you cannot fully experience what is here. You are divided. Part of you is in the present. The other part is in the past or in imagination. And that division creates suffering, not the moment itself, but your inability to let it be what it is. This is where the shift begins, not by forcing yourself to feel better, not by pretending nothing hurts, but by noticing your resistance. By seeing the moment your mind says, "This should not be happening." And instead of following that thought, you pause. You ask something different. What is actually here, right now? Not what you wanted, not what you expected, but what is real? That question brings you back to the present, back to what is actually happening, without the added layer of judgment. And something softens, slightly, not completely, but enough to feel the difference. Because you are no longer fighting the moment, you are allowing it. And in that space, pain begins to move. It is no longer frozen by resistance. It flows, it changes, it passes. And you realize something quietly powerful. The event may have hurt you, but the suffering came from holding on. And once you see that, you begin to understand something deeper. You do not have control over what happens, but you do have awareness of how you respond. And that awareness is where freedom begins. You begin to loosen your grip. You stop fighting every moment. You start allowing things to be what they are. You notice your resistance, and sometimes you let it go. And for the first time, there is a little space, a little quiet, a little relief. But then something unexpected happens again. Pain still returns. Not always the same situation, not always the same people, but the same feeling. A familiar weight, a familiar reaction, a familiar kind of hurt. And now the question becomes deeper. If I am not resisting as much, why does this keep coming back? That is where most people stop. They feel like they have tried. They feel like they have understood something. But life still seems to repeat itself. And here is the truth that most people avoid. You are not just experiencing pain. You are repeating it. Not consciously, not intentionally, but through patterns you have not fully seen yet. Because letting go in one moment does not mean the pattern is gone. It only means you have seen it once. But patterns live deeper. They are built over time, through habits, through beliefs, through ways of reacting that feel natural to you. And unless those patterns are seen clearly, they continue, quietly. You meet a new person, and something feels familiar, not obvious, but comfortable, recognizable. And without realizing it, you respond the same way. You trust quickly. You ignore certain signs. You hope things will be different, and for a while it feels different. But then, the same kind of pain appears, and it feels like bad luck, like coincidence, like something outside of you is repeating. But what if it is not outside? What if it is something within you? choosing, reacting, holding on, in the same way each time. This is the part that creates discomfort because it shifts the responsibility, not as blame, but as awareness. You begin to ask a different question, not why does this keep happening to me, but what am I doing that keeps leading me here? That question is not easy because it requires honesty. You start to notice things you missed before, the kind of people you are drawn to, the way you respond when you feel uncertain, the moments you choose comfort over clarity. You begin to see that your reactions are not random. They follow a pattern, a familiar path your mind has learned. And until that path is seen clearly, you walk it again. Not because you want to suffer, but because it feels known, predictable, safe in a strange way, even if it leads to pain. This is why change feels difficult, because awareness is not just about understanding. It is about seeing something so clearly that you can no longer ignore it. And once you see it, you cannot pretend it is not there. You notice the moment before you react, the moment before you hold on, the moment before you choose what feels familiar. And in that moment, there is a pause, small but real. And inside that pause, something new becomes possible. You do not have to follow the same path. You do not have to repeat the same reaction. You do not have to continue the same pattern. But this is where most people hesitate, because the familiar, even when painful, feels easier than the unknown. So they return, again and again, until one day, the awareness becomes stronger than the habit. And that is when something shifts, not outside, but inside. You begin to act differently, not dramatically, but enough to change the direction, enough to break the cycle. And that is when you realize something important. Life was not repeating to hurt you. It was repeating, so you could finally see. So now you see more than you did before. You see the patterns. You see the resistance. You see how tightly you were holding on. You see how life was not attacking you, but showing you something. And for the first time, there is a quiet shift inside you. Not dramatic, not loud, but real. Because now when something happens, you do not react the same way. You pause, even if just for a moment. And in that pause, something changes. Before, you would ask, why is this happening to me? Now, something else begins to form. A different kind of question. What is this showing me? That question feels small, but it changes everything. Because it moves you out of resistance, out of blame, out of the need to control what cannot be controlled, and brings you into awareness. You begin to look at the moment differently, not as something wrong, but as something revealing. A reaction shows you where you are still attached. A disappointment shows you where you are still expecting. A painful situation shows you where you are still unaware. And slowly, you stop fighting life. You stop trying to make everything fit your idea of how it should be. Because you see something clearly now. Life does not follow your expectations. It does not adjust itself to protect you from discomfort. It unfolds according to causes and conditions. And your experience of it depends on how clearly you see those conditions. This is where the real transformation begins. Not when life becomes easier, but when you stop needing it to be easy. Not when pain disappears, but when you understand it. Not when everything goes your way, but when your peace no longer depends on that. Because now something deeper is forming. Stability, not based on outcomes, not based on people, but based on awareness. You begin to trust something within you, not your thoughts, not your expectations, but your ability to see, to notice, to understand. And that trust is different. It does not come from certainty. It comes from clarity. Because even when things go wrong, you know you will see what is there. Even when something hurts, you know you will not run blindly from it. Even when life feels uncertain, you know you will not lose yourself inside it. That is a different kind of strength. Quiet, steady, unshaken by every small change. And here is the part most people do not expect. Life does not stop bringing challenges. People still act in ways you do not expect. Situations still change without warning. Loss still happens. But your relationship to those things is no longer the same. You are not pulled into every reaction. You are not trapped in every pattern. Because now, you see. And once you see clearly, you cannot go back to being completely unaware. You may still feel pain, but you do not create the same suffering. You may still experience difficulty, but you do not get lost in it the same way. Because awareness creates space. Space between what happens and how you respond. And in that space, freedom begins. Not the freedom to control life, but the freedom to move through it without being controlled by it. And maybe that is the real answer you were searching for all along. Not why bad things happen to good people, but how those moments can become the beginning of something deeper, something clearer, something more real. Because in the end, life was never trying to break you. It was trying to wake you up. And now, you are starting to see.